Welcome to Silent Fears. Most people think Walmart is just another store, but these 7 documented cases reveal a darker truth. Tonight, we're sharing real horror stories where routine shopping trips turned into nightmarish encounters that made national headlines. From employee testimonies to police reports, each incident proves that sometimes the most terrifying experiences happen in the most ordinary places. These aren't urban legends. They're real events that corporate training manuals could never prepare anyone for. What you're about to hear actually happened. And that's what makes these stories truly disturbing. Let's move to our first story. This account comes from the personal journal entries of Marcus, a 19-year-old college freshman who took his first job as an overnight cashier at a Walmart supercenter in suburban Ohio during October 2023. Marcus documented his experiences in a daily journal, which was later discovered by his family when he never returned home after his final shift. The entries reveal a gradual descent into psychological terror that began innocuously but escalated into something far more disturbing. Marcus's first journal entry from October 3, 2023, describes his excitement about finally getting a job to help pay for college expenses. The overnight shift from midnight to 8 a.m. paid slightly more than daytime positions, and as a naturally quiet person, he felt the reduced customer traffic would suit him perfectly. His initial training went smoothly, and he quickly learned the checkout procedures and basic store policies. The electronics section where he was stationed remained relatively peaceful during those first few weeks, with most late-night customers being shift workers grabbing quick meals or essential items before heading home. Marcus wrote enthusiastically about his co-workers, describing how the overnight crew had developed a close-knit community despite working in relative isolation from the daytime staff. The first unusual incident occurred during his 3rd week, documented in his October 24th entry. Around 2:30 in the morning, Marcus noticed a middle-aged man in a worn blue jacket who had been walking slowly through the electronics aisles for over an hour. The man wasn't shopping. He never picked up any items or examined products. Instead, he seemed to be studying Marcus, watching his movements and timing his activities. When Marcus tried making eye contact and offering assistance, the man would turn away and pretend to browse nearby merchandise. This behavior continued for several nights, with the same individual appearing around the same time and following the identical pattern of surveillance. Marcus initially dismissed this as perhaps a lonely person seeking human interaction or someone killing time before their own late shift began. But the consistency of the pattern began to unnerve him. Marcus's journal entries from early November reveal his growing anxiety about this nightly visitor. The man never purchased anything, never spoke to anyone, and somehow always managed to leave the store without Marcus noticing his departure. Security cameras in the electronics section had multiple blind spots, and the overnight security guard often made rounds in other areas of the massive store. Marcus began documenting the man's appearances, noting that he arrived consistently between 2:15 and 2:30 a.m., always wearing the same faded clothing, and always positioning himself where he could observe the electronics checkout counter from different angles while remaining partially hidden behind displays. The man's physical description never varied. Approximately 50 years old, average height, thinning brown hair, and deep-set eyes that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the harsh fluorescent lighting. The psychological pressure intensified when Marcus realized the man had somehow learned his schedule. On nights when Marcus was assigned to different areas or called in sick, the mysterious visitor never appeared. However, whenever Marcus worked his regular electronics station, the man materialized like clockwork. This pattern suggested the individual had access to employee scheduling information or had been conducting extensive surveillance of the store to learn Marcus's routine. The journal entries from November show Marcus becoming increasingly paranoid, constantly checking over his shoulder and jumping at every sound in the normally quiet overnight environment. His academic performance began suffering as sleep became elusive, and he found himself dreading the approach of each work shift. Marcus began researching the store's history and discovered that 3 previous employees in the electronics department had quit without notice over the past 18 months, all citing personal safety concerns in their exit interviews. When he discreetly questioned other overnight workers about unusual customers, several mentioned seeing the same man, but dismissed him as harmless. However, one maintenance worker pulled Marcus aside and warned him that the individual had been asking specific questions about employee schedules and break times. This revelation confirmed Marcus's worst fears. The surveillance was deliberate and targeted specifically at electronics department workers. The situation escalated dramatically on November 18th, as documented in Marcus's increasingly frantic handwriting. The mysterious man approached the electronics counter for the first time, but instead of making a purchase, he simply stood there staring directly at Marcus without speaking. When Marcus asked if he needed help, the man smiled slowly and said, "I've been watching you work. You're very careful with your routines, very predictable." The man then placed a small, folded piece of paper on the counter and walked away. Marcus discovered his home address written inside, along with a detailed description of his daily schedule outside of work, including his class times, the route he took to campus, and the coffee shop where he studied. The note also contained personal details about his family members and their routines, proving the surveillance extended far beyond the workplace. Marcus's November 19th entry reveals his terrified realization that this stalker had been conducting extensive surveillance of his entire life, not just his work activities. The journal describes his desperate attempts to vary his routines, taking different routes home and changing his study locations. However, these efforts seemed futile as the man continued appearing at work with new pieces of personal information. He knew about Marcus's girlfriend Sarah, his part-time tutoring job, even the specific books he was reading for his literature classes. The psychological torture of knowing someone was constantly watching and documenting his every move began affecting Marcus's sleep, appetite, and academic performance. He considered quitting his job but desperately needed the income to continue his education. Marcus attempted to involve store management, but his complaints were dismissed as overreaction to a harmless, eccentric customer. The assistant manager suggested Marcus was experiencing stress from balancing work and college, implying the situation was imaginary. Security footage reviews yielded nothing concrete since the man never engaged in obviously threatening behavior and always purchased small items to justify his presence. When Marcus tried filing a police report, officers explained that no actual crimes had been committed. Following someone in a public space and knowing personal information wasn't illegal unless specific threats were made. The final entries become increasingly erratic and desperate. Marcus wrote about feeling trapped in a nightmare where privacy no longer existed and safety was an illusion. He documented finding notes tucked into his car's windshield wipers, discovering someone had been through his apartment mailbox, and noticing subtle signs that his residence had been surveilled. His shower curtain had been moved, food items in his refrigerator were rearranged, and personal belongings showed evidence of careful examination and replacement. The man at Walmart became bolder, sometimes appearing at the counter multiple times per night, always with new revelations about Marcus's private life that proved the surveillance was expanding and intensifying. The stalker knew about Marcus's financial difficulties, his relationship problems with Sarah, and even confidential conversations Marcus had with his academic advisor about changing majors. Marcus's psychological state deteriorated as the harassment campaign expanded beyond work hours. He began sleeping with furniture barricaded against his apartment door and installed additional locks that were mysteriously compromised within days. Phone calls at odd hours featured only breathing, and his computer showed signs of remote access despite firewall protection. The stalker's presence at work became more overtly menacing. He would mouth Marcus's name silently from across the store and make throat-cutting gestures when no security cameras could capture the behavior. Other employees began avoiding Marcus, either because they thought he was having a mental breakdown or because they feared becoming targets themselves. Marcus's last coherent journal entry, dated December 2, 2023, describes his plan to confront the situation directly. He had purchased a small recording device and intended to document his next interaction with the stalker to present evidence to police. The entry reveals his determination to end this nightmare tonight and reclaim his sense of security, regardless of consequences. He wrote about feeling like a hunted animal and expressed his belief that the stalker was escalating toward physical violence. Marcus detailed his plan to provoke a confrontation while recording evidence, hoping to force the individual into making explicit threats that would justify police intervention. Store security footage shows Marcus arriving for his shift that evening at 11:35 p.m., appearing agitated and constantly checking over his shoulder. He clocked in normally, but never appeared at his assigned checkout station in the electronics department. His employee access card registered movement through various store areas between midnight and 1:47 a.m., suggesting he was actively searching for something or someone. The final card scan occurred at the loading dock exit, an area typically restricted to management and delivery personnel. His car was found in the employee parking lot the next morning, with his uniform shirt folded neatly on the driver's seat, his name tag placed carefully on top, and his recording device smashed beyond repair on the passenger floor. The investigation revealed that Marcus had used his employee access card to enter restricted areas throughout the night, apparently pursuing someone through the store's maze-like interior. However, despite extensive review of security footage and interviews with other overnight employees, no trace of the mysterious man in the blue jacket was ever found. Store management claimed no record of any customer matching Marcus's detailed descriptions, and security tapes from the electronics section showed Marcus apparently interacting with empty space during several documented encounters. The case remains unsolved, and Marcus has never been located, leaving only his detailed journal as evidence of the psychological horror that consumed his final weeks of documented existence. Let's move to our second story. This account comes from the official security footage analysis and expert commentary provided by Dr. Grace, a forensic toxicologist who testified in the criminal case against Willow, a former Walmart customer in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. The incident occurred during a busy Saturday afternoon in March 2023, when what appeared to be routine grocery shopping turned into a deliberate contamination scheme that endangered dozens of families. The case file documents reveal a methodical pattern of product tampering that went undetected for several weeks, until laboratory testing exposed the horrifying truth about what Willow had been introducing into the store's food supply. The investigation began on March 18, 2023, when Riley, a 35-year-old mother of twins, brought her family to the emergency room at Phoenix General Hospital after consuming what she believed was contaminated produce purchased from the Walmart Supercenter on Bell Road. Riley's 7-year-old daughter Atlas had experienced severe gastrointestinal distress after eating prepackaged salad mix, while her husband Apollo developed similar symptoms from consuming strawberries purchased the same day. Initially, hospital staff suspected routine food poisoning, but toxicology tests revealed the presence of industrial cleaning compounds that had no natural occurrence in organic produce. The discovery prompted an immediate investigation by both hospital administrators and local health authorities, who contacted the Centers for Disease Control to analyze product samples still remaining in the family's refrigerator. Dr. Grace's analysis of the contaminated produce revealed trace amounts of benzalkonium chloride, a powerful disinfectant commonly used in commercial cleaning products, but extremely dangerous when ingested by humans. The concentration levels were precisely measured to cause illness without immediate fatality, suggesting deliberate calculation rather than accidental exposure. Further laboratory testing identified additional chemical signatures, indicating the contamination had occurred after the products left their original packaging facilities, but before reaching consumers' homes. This narrow window pointed to tampering within the retail environment itself, prompting investigators to request complete security footage from the store's surveillance system for the previous month. Security footage analysis revealed the disturbing pattern of Willow's behavior over a 3-week period beginning in late February 2023. Willow, a 42-year-old former pharmaceutical technician who had been terminated from her previous job for policy violations, appeared on camera making regular visits to the store's produce section. Unlike typical shoppers who moved efficiently through displays while selecting items, Willow exhibited methodical behavior that suggested familiarity with store layout and employee schedules. She consistently arrived during peak afternoon hours when the produce department was busiest, and staff attention was divided among multiple customers and restocking duties. Her movements followed specific patterns, targeting particular product types while avoiding areas with direct camera angles or heavy foot traffic. The breakthrough in the investigation came when security analysts noticed Willow's unusual interaction with prepackaged items in the organic produce section. Footage from March 10th shows Willow selecting packages of mixed greens, taking them to a blind spot behind a large refrigeration unit, and spending approximately 4 minutes manipulating the packaging before returning items to the shelves. High-resolution analysis revealed Willow had developed a sophisticated method for introducing contaminants into sealed packages without obviously damaging the outer wrapping. Using a medical-grade syringe, she punctured package seals in locations that appeared as normal wear marks, injected measured amounts of diluted cleaning solution, and carefully resealed the entry points with clear adhesive strips that were virtually undetectable to casual inspection. Willow's background investigation revealed a troubling history of workplace conflicts and vindictive behavior toward former employers. After losing her pharmaceutical technician position 6 months earlier due to accusations of medication theft, she had filed unsuccessful lawsuits against 3 different companies claiming workplace discrimination. Court records showed a pattern of escalating grievances against various retail establishments, where she claimed to have received poor customer service or defective products. Friends and family members described her increasing obsession with teaching lessons to businesses that she felt had wronged consumers, suggesting the Walmart contamination scheme was part of a larger vendetta against corporate retailers. The scope of Willow's contamination campaign became clear as investigators expanded their analysis of security footage and cross-referenced hospital admissions from the surrounding area. Over the 3-week period, Willow had systematically targeted different product categories, including packaged salads, berry containers, pre-cut vegetables, and refrigerated prepared foods. Her selection criteria prioritized items likely to be consumed quickly by families with children, indicating intent to maximize harm rather than simply cause inconvenience. Laboratory analysis of returned products identified contamination in 47 different items, affecting an estimated 63 families who had purchased tainted goods. The chemical concentrations varied slightly between products, suggesting Willow was experimenting with dosages to achieve specific effects. Willow's method evolved throughout the contamination campaign as she became more confident in her abilities to avoid detection. Early incidents involved simple injection of cleaning solutions into produce packages, but later episodes showed sophisticated techniques, including resealing containers with professional-grade equipment and introducing time-delayed chemical reactions that would activate hours after purchase. Investigators discovered Willow had researched food science and toxicology extensively, using public library computers to study contamination methods and chemical interaction effects. Her search history revealed queries about symptoms of various poisoning agents, shelf life of chemical compounds in organic environments, and legal penalties for food tampering crimes. The psychological profile developed by court-appointed psychiatrists revealed Willow's contamination scheme as an elaborate form of displaced aggression targeting innocent families as proxies for her anger toward corporate entities. Her detailed journals, discovered during the search warrant execution, documented elaborate fantasies about causing widespread panic and forcing major retailers to implement costly safety measures. She viewed her actions as consumer advocacy, believing that creating fear about food safety would ultimately benefit shoppers by forcing improved quality control standards. The journals also revealed her disappointment that early incidents hadn't generated sufficient media attention or corporate response to validate her perceived importance. The investigation expanded when Willow's contamination activities were linked to similar incidents at competing grocery chains throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. Security footage from 3 different retailers showed Willow employing identical techniques in their produce sections, suggesting a coordinated campaign targeting multiple businesses simultaneously. Chemical analysis confirmed that the same compound signatures appeared in contaminated products from different stores, proving Willow had been operating a systematic poisoning scheme across the entire regional food distribution network. The discovery prompted a massive product recall, affecting hundreds of thousands of items and costing retailers millions of dollars in losses and remediation efforts. Willow's arrest occurred on April 2, 2023. When undercover investigators observed her tampering with products in real time. Store security had been alerted to watch for suspicious behavior in the produce section, and plainclothes officers witnessed Willow injecting an unknown substance into packages of organic spinach. Chemical analysis of her syringe contents revealed a concentrated mixture of industrial disinfectants and household cleaning products that would have caused severe chemical burns and potential organ damage if consumed in the intended quantities. The arrest prevented what toxicologists later determined would have been potentially fatal poisoning of multiple families, as Willow had significantly increased the concentration levels in her most recent contamination attempts. The criminal trial revealed the full extent of Willow's psychological manipulation and the calculated nature of her crimes. Prosecutors presented evidence that Willow had deliberately targeted products popular with families containing young children, knowing that pediatric victims would suffer more severe symptoms and generate greater public outrage. Her contamination schedule was timed to coincide with busy shopping periods, when store employees would be too distracted to notice suspicious behavior. And she had researched employee shift changes to minimize her chances of encountering the same staff members repeatedly. The prosecution argued that Willow's actions constituted attempted murder rather than simple product tampering, given the potentially lethal concentrations of chemicals she was introducing into the food supply. The case concluded with Willow receiving a 15-year federal prison sentence for multiple counts of food tampering. reckless endangerment, and assault with a dangerous weapon. The judge cited the calculated nature of her crimes and the extraordinary danger posed to innocent families as factors warranting the maximum allowable penalty. Dr. Grace's expert testimony established that Willow's contamination scheme could have resulted in multiple fatalities if her activities had continued undetected for additional weeks, as she was clearly escalating both the frequency of incidents and the toxicity of substances being introduced. The case led to enhanced security protocols at major retailers nationwide and prompted new federal legislation increasing penalties for food tampering crimes to deter similar acts of domestic terrorism disguised as consumer advocacy. Let's move to our third story. This account comes from the official police interrogation transcript of Detective Lauren Hayes, who conducted the questioning of 17-year-old Blake after his arrest for aggravated stalking charges. The case emerged from a pattern of harassment that began in November 2023 at a Walmart supercenter in rural Tennessee, where Blake worked as a cart attendant while completing his senior year of high school. What started as workplace observations escalated into a systematic stalking campaign that terrorized a local family and culminated in a home invasion attempt that shook the entire community. Blake had been employed at the Walmart location for 3 months when he first encountered Jessica Chen, a 30-year-old marketing executive who regularly shopped at the store with her 8-year-old daughter Lily. According to the interrogation transcript, Blake became fixated on Jessica during her routine grocery visits, initially justifying his attention as customer service awareness. However, security footage analysis revealed Blake had begun timing his cart collection duties to coincide with Jessica's shopping schedule, which he had memorized after observing her patterns for several weeks. The transcript reveals Blake's disturbing rationalization that his surveillance was protective rather than predatory, demonstrating a fundamental misunderstanding of appropriate social boundaries that would prove increasingly dangerous. Detective Hayes' questioning revealed that Blake's stalking behavior began with seemingly innocent interactions during Jessica's shopping trips. He would approach her in different store sections, offering assistance with reaching items or providing information about product locations. Jessica initially appreciated what she perceived as exceptional customer service, unaware that Blake was deliberately positioning himself to learn details about her personal life through casual conversation. Blake admitted during interrogation that he gradually extracted information about Jessica's work schedule, her daughter's school activities, and their family routines by engaging in friendly chit-chat while helping with their shopping needs. The escalation became apparent when Blake began following Jessica and Lily outside the store premises. Security cameras captured Blake leaving his workstation during break periods to observe Jessica loading groceries into her car, noting her license plate number and vehicle details. The interrogation transcript reveals Blake's confession that he used this information to locate Jessica's home address through online databases, justifying his actions as ensuring customer safety in the parking lot. However, his behavior quickly progressed beyond workplace boundaries as he began driving past Jessica's house during his off-duty hours. Learning the family's daily routines and documenting their activities in a detailed journal, Blake's psychological profile, developed through extensive questioning, revealed a troubled teenager struggling with social isolation and romantic rejection. His fixation on Jessica represented what psychologists term fantasy relationship syndrome, where the stalker develops an imaginary emotional connection with the victim. Blake genuinely believed that Jessica enjoyed their store interactions and had developed romantic feelings for him, despite the significant age difference and his position as a minimum wage employee. The transcript shows Blake's increasing frustration when Jessica's behavior didn't align with his fantasized relationship expectations, leading to more aggressive surveillance tactics. The situation intensified when Blake discovered Jessica's daily routine included dropping Lily off at elementary school before proceeding to her office downtown. Blake began arriving at the school early in the mornings, positioning himself where he could observe the drop-off process while remaining inconspicuous among other parents and school staff. Teachers later reported noticing an unfamiliar teenager lingering near the school property. But Blake's youthful appearance and casual clothing allowed him to blend in without arousing immediate suspicion. The interrogation revealed Blake's detailed knowledge of Lily's class schedule, teacher assignments, and after-school activities, information he could only have obtained through extensive surveillance of the school environment. Blake's workplace behavior became increasingly erratic as his obsession deepened. Co-workers reported that he frequently abandoned his cart duties to monitor Jessica's shopping activities, often neglecting his assigned responsibilities when she visited the store. Management received complaints about Blake approaching female customers inappropriately. But these incidents were initially handled as minor customer service violations rather than recognizing the pattern of predatory behavior. The transcript reveals Blake's anger toward store managers who restricted his interactions with customers, viewing their interventions as obstacles to his imagined relationship with Jessica rather than appropriate workplace corrections. The stalking campaign reached a critical point when Blake began leaving gifts at Jessica's home and workplace. Initially, these consisted of flowers and handwritten notes expressing his feelings and describing their supposed relationship. Jessica, who had never provided her home address or workplace information to Blake, became alarmed when she realized the extent of surveillance required to obtain such personal details. The notes contained intimate knowledge about her daily routines, work projects, and even private conversations she had conducted with Lily, indicating that Blake had been conducting extensive electronic surveillance in addition to physical stalking. Jessica's attempts to address the harassment through official channels proved initially unsuccessful. When she contacted the Walmart store manager about Blake's behavior, she was told that customer service interactions couldn't be restricted without evidence of specific policy violations. Local police treated her initial complaints as minor harassment issues, suggesting she avoid shopping at that particular location rather than recognizing the escalating nature of Blake's behavior. This lack of institutional response emboldened Blake, who interpreted the absence of consequences as validation that his actions were acceptable or even appreciated. The case took a dangerous turn when Blake's surveillance expanded to include Jessica's workplace and social activities. He began appearing at her office building during lunch hours and following her to restaurants and stores during weekend errands. Blake's journal, recovered during his arrest, contained detailed maps of Jessica's daily routes, timing charts for her activities, and elaborate plans for engineering coincidental encounters in various locations. The interrogation transcript reveals Blake's increasing frustration that Jessica wasn't responding positively to his escalating gestures, leading him to believe that more dramatic actions were necessary to demonstrate his devotion. The situation reached its terrifying climax on December 15, 2023, when Blake attempted to enter Jessica's home during the early morning hours. Using information gathered from months of surveillance, he knew that Jessica typically left for work at 7:30 a.m. after dropping Lily at school. Blake's plan, as revealed in his interrogation confession, was to hide inside the house and surprise Jessica with a romantic gesture when she returned from work that evening. However, Jessica had unexpectedly stayed home sick that day, and she discovered Blake attempting to break in through a rear window at approximately 2 a.m. Jessica's 911 call, played during the interrogation, captured her terror as she realized that the teenage store employee who had seemed helpful and friendly was actually attempting to break into her home in the middle of the night. Blake's response to being discovered was not to flee, but rather to try explaining his actions as a romantic surprise, demonstrating his complete disconnect from reality regarding the nature of stalking behavior. Police arrived to find Blake still on the property, attempting to convince Jessica through her locked bedroom door that his intentions were loving rather than threatening. Detective Hayes' questioning revealed the full extent of Blake's delusions about his relationship with Jessica. Even after his arrest, Blake maintained that Jessica had encouraged his attention through friendly conversations at the store, and that his surveillance activities were expressions of caring rather than harassment. The transcript shows Blake's inability to understand why his actions were criminal, repeatedly asking why Jessica had contacted police instead of simply telling him she wasn't interested in a relationship. His responses demonstrated classic stalker psychology, where rejection is interpreted as temporary obstacles rather than definitive boundaries. The investigation uncovered additional victims who had experienced similar harassment from Blake during his employment at Walmart. 3 other female customers reported receiving unwanted attention, unexpected gifts, and evidence that their personal information had been obtained without consent. However, Jessica's case was the most severe, representing a clear escalation pattern that likely would have resulted in physical violence if the home invasion attempt had been successful. Blake's journal contained increasingly violent fantasies about forcing Jessica to acknowledge their relationship, indicating that his behavior was progressing toward potentially lethal outcomes. Blake was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison for aggravated stalking, attempted breaking and entering, and harassment charges. The case prompted Walmart corporate headquarters to implement enhanced employee screening procedures and mandatory training programs about appropriate customer interactions. Jessica and her family relocated to another state, fundamentally altering their lives to escape the psychological trauma of Blake's campaign. The interrogation transcript stands as a chilling reminder of how workplace access can enable predatory behavior and how institutional failures to recognize warning signs can escalate minor harassment into life-threatening situations. Let's move to our 4th story. This account comes from the emergency radio communications transcribed during a hostage situation that unfolded at a Walmart supercenter in North Carolina during August 2023. The incident began as a routine armed robbery attempt, but escalated into a 12-hour standoff that required intervention from multiple law enforcement agencies and SWAT teams. The real-time emergency responder recordings capture the terrifying moment when what appeared to be a simple theft transformed into a life-threatening situation that held an entire store hostage and revealed the shocking depths of desperation that drive criminal behavior. Store manager Ocean had been employed at the Charlotte location for 8 years when he encountered the most terrifying night of his career on August 23, 2023. The emergency radio transcript begins at 9:47 p.m. when Ocean contacted dispatch after discovering that someone had been hiding in the store after closing hours. Initial reports suggested a routine break-in attempt, but the situation quickly revealed itself to be far more dangerous when the intruder, later identified as 31-year-old Skylar, emerged from the electronics section carrying a military-style assault rifle and a backpack containing what appeared to be explosive devices. The radio communications reveal Ocean's growing panic as he realized that Skylar wasn't interested in stealing merchandise, but was instead systematically securing the building to prevent escape. Skylar had apparently been studying the store's layout for weeks, as evidenced by his immediate knowledge of security camera locations, emergency exits, and employee-only areas. He quickly disabled the main electrical systems, plunging most of the store into darkness while using emergency lighting to create an atmosphere of terror that would psychologically control anyone trapped inside the building. Skylar's demands, as relayed through Ocean during radio communications with police negotiators, revealed a complex motivation beyond simple robbery. He claimed to be seeking justice for what he called corporate exploitation of working-class families, specifically targeting Walmart as a symbol of economic inequality. Schuyler had apparently lost his job at a competing retail chain 6 months earlier and blamed large corporations for destroying small businesses and creating unemployment in his community. His manifesto, later discovered in his vehicle, outlined elaborate plans to use the hostage situation to draw media attention to his anti-corporate message. The hostage situation became more complex when Ocean reported that Schuyler had taken 17 people captive, including 12 customers who had been shopping late and 5 employees who were completing closing procedures. Among the hostages were Victoria, a 73-year-old grandmother shopping for her diabetic medication, and 8-year-old Stone, who had been separated from his parents during the initial chaos when Schuyler secured the building. The radio transcript captures Ocean's desperate attempts to keep the hostages calm, while relaying Schuyler's increasingly erratic demands to police negotiators. Emergency responders faced unique challenges because Schuyler had chosen the Walmart location strategically. The massive building size provided numerous hiding places and multiple potential escape routes, while the store's location near a major highway intersection made it difficult to establish a secure perimeter without disrupting traffic throughout the city. Schuyler demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of law enforcement tactics, using the store's public address system to monitor police radio frequencies and adjusting his strategy based on information he intercepted from emergency communications. The negotiation process revealed Schuyler's deteriorating mental state as the hours progressed. Initially coherent and focused on his anti-corporate message, Schuyler became increasingly paranoid and aggressive as fatigue and stress affected his judgment. Radio communications show Ocean reporting that Schuyler had begun separating hostages into different areas of the store, threatening to harm elderly or sick individuals if his demands weren't met within specific time frames. The presence of Stone, the 8-year-old child, added emotional pressure to an already volatile situation. Ocean's background as a military veteran proved crucial during the crisis, as his combat experience helped him maintain composure while serving as the primary communication link between Schuyler and outside negotiators. The radio transcript shows Ocean carefully managing his interactions with Schuyler, using de-escalation techniques to prevent violence, while gathering intelligence about the hostage locations and Schuyler's emotional state. However, Ocean also struggled with the moral complexity of essentially collaborating with someone who was threatening innocent people, including a child. The situation reached its most dangerous point around 4 a.m., when Schuyler discovered that police had attempted to infiltrate the building through the loading dock area. His reaction was immediate and violent, firing multiple rounds into the store's ceiling while screaming threats against the hostages. Radio communications capture Ocean's terrified reports that Schuyler had begun making explicit threats to execute hostages if he detected any further rescue attempts. The gunfire caused panic among the captives, with several elderly hostages suffering medical emergencies that couldn't be properly treated. Schuyler's psychological profile, developed through real-time analysis of his statements and behavior as reported by Ocean, revealed classic signs of what psychologists term pseudo-commando syndrome. He viewed himself as a warrior fighting against societal injustice, using the hostage situation to achieve a sense of power and importance that had been missing from his life since losing his job. The radio transcript shows Schuyler alternating between grandiose statements about his mission and desperate pleas for recognition of his grievances against corporate America. The breakthrough came when negotiators convinced Schuyler to allow medical attention for Victoria, whose diabetes medication needs created a life-threatening emergency. Schuyler agreed to permit a paramedic to enter the store, but only if the individual came unarmed and alone. This decision provided law enforcement with the opportunity they needed, as the paramedic was actually an undercover SWAT officer trained in medical procedures. Radio communications show the careful coordination required to execute this deception without endangering the hostages. The final phase of the crisis began at 6:23 a.m. when Schuyler realized he had been deceived about the paramedic's identity. His reaction was explosive, but the undercover officer had already gathered crucial intelligence about the hostage locations and Schuyler's positioning within the store. The radio transcript captures the intense coordination between multiple SWAT teams as they executed simultaneous entry through different parts of the building, using flashbang grenades to disorient Schuyler while minimizing risk to the captives. The resolution came suddenly after 12 hours of terror. Schuyler, overwhelmed by the coordinated assault and realizing his situation was hopeless, surrendered without firing additional shots. However, the psychological trauma inflicted on the hostages was severe and lasting. Radio communications show the immediate medical response required for several individuals who had suffered heart attacks, panic disorders, and other stress-related injuries during the prolonged ordeal. Stone required extensive counseling to recover from the trauma of being held captive for an entire night. The investigation revealed that Schuyler had been planning the hostage situation for several months, conducting reconnaissance of multiple retail locations before settling on the Walmart supercenter as his target. His apartment contained detailed floor plans, employee schedules, and psychological profiles of management personnel, indicating a level of preparation that transformed what might have been an impulsive crime into a calculated act of domestic terrorism. Schuyler's internet search history showed extensive research into hostage negotiation tactics and law enforcement response procedures. Ocean received commendation from law enforcement agencies for his courage and professionalism during the crisis. But he also suffered lasting psychological effects from the experience. The radio transcript stands as a testament to the extraordinary demands placed on ordinary individuals when confronted with extreme violence and the life-or-death responsibility of protecting innocent people. Schuyler was ultimately sentenced to life in prison, without parole for multiple counts of kidnapping, terroristic threats, and weapons violations. But the trauma inflicted on his victims continues to affect their lives years after the incident. Let's move to our fifth story. This account comes from the maintenance worker personal video log discovered after the disappearance of Dante, a 28-year-old single father who worked the overnight cleaning shift at a Walmart supercenter in rural Montana. The recorded testimonies span 3 weeks in September 2023, documenting increasingly disturbing supernatural phenomena that began affecting the store's overnight crew during their routine maintenance duties. What started as minor equipment malfunctions escalated into inexplicable events that challenged everything Dante believed about reality and ultimately led to his mysterious vanishing from the store's premises. Dante's first video entry from September 4th, 2023, shows him in his small apartment explaining his decision to document unusual occurrences at his workplace. As a cleaning crew supervisor responsible for maintaining the store's massive interior during overnight hours, Dante had become familiar with every corner of the building over his 2-year employment period. However, recent incidents had begun affecting his sleep and mental health, prompting him to create video evidence of what he described as impossible things happening in a normal place. The initial recording shows a tired but rational man concerned about his job security and his ability to provide for his 7-year-old daughter, Maya. The supernatural encounters began with subtle equipment malfunctions that gradually intensified over several nights. Dante's September 6th recording describes how industrial floor cleaning machines would activate on their own, following predetermined routes through empty aisles while making sounds he had never heard during normal operations. These machines, which required manual startup procedures and specific programming, somehow began operating autonomously around 3 a.m. each night, completing cleaning patterns that hadn't been programmed into their systems. When Dante attempted to shut them down manually, the machines would restart within minutes, continuing their mysterious cleaning cycles. The phenomena escalated when Dante discovered that the self-operating equipment was accessing areas of the store that should have been impossible to reach. His September 10th video shows security footage he obtained from the night manager, revealing floor cleaners moving through locked storage areas and restricted employee sections without any doors being opened. The machines appeared to phase through solid barriers, continuing their cleaning routines in spaces that were physically inaccessible. Even more disturbing, the cleaned areas showed perfect maintenance results, despite no cleaning supplies being consumed from the machine's reservoirs. Dante's psychological state began deteriorating as he realized other overnight employees were experiencing similar phenomena, but refusing to discuss their encounters. His September 12th recording reveals conversations with co-workers who admitted seeing equipment operating independently, but feared reporting incidents that might result in their termination. The overnight crew had developed an unspoken agreement to ignore supernatural occurrences, treating them as hallucinations caused by fatigue and isolation. However, Dante's video evidence proved the phenomena were objectively real rather than stress-induced delusions. The situation intensified when Dante began encountering what he described as presence manifestations during his cleaning duties. His September 15th video documents shadows moving independently of their sources, following him through aisles while he performed routine maintenance tasks. These shadows exhibited purposeful behavior, responding to Dante's movements and appearing to observe his activities with intelligent awareness. Unlike normal shadows created by lighting conditions, these entities moved against light sources and maintained consistent forms, regardless of environmental factors. Dante's most chilling recording from September 18th captures electronic voice phenomena through the store's intercom system during overnight hours. While performing inventory counts in the electronics section, Dante heard whispered conversations emanating from speakers throughout the building. The voices, which he recorded using his personal equipment, discussed store operations and employee activities with knowledge that would be impossible for unauthorized individuals to possess. The conversations referenced specific merchandise locations, employee schedules, and customer information that suggested supernatural entities had been observing store operations for extended periods. The supernatural activity reached its peak when Dante discovered that the phenomena were connected to the store's history rather than random paranormal events. His September 20th investigation revealed that the Walmart Supercenter had been constructed on the site of a former factory where several workers had died in industrial accidents during the 1940s. Local newspaper archives, which Dante researched between shifts, documented multiple fatalities involving equipment malfunctions and workplace safety violations that resulted in the factory's closure. The similarity between historical industrial accidents and current supernatural manifestations suggested that deceased workers were continuing their duties in the afterlife. Dante's penultimate recording from September 22nd shows his growing obsession with understanding the supernatural phenomena rather than simply documenting their occurrence. He began attempting communication with the entities, staying after his scheduled shifts to interact with the autonomous equipment and shadow manifestations. His video log reveals increasingly erratic behavior as he tried to establish dialogue with what he believed were the spirits of former factory workers. Dante's rational explanations for supernatural events gradually gave way to acceptance of paranormal reality and desire for direct contact with otherworldly entities. The final video entry, recorded on September 24th, captures Dante's last known activities before his disappearance. The recording shows him entering the store for his regular overnight shift, but documenting his intention to spend the entire night attempting communication with supernatural presences. Dante expresses his belief that the entities were trying to convey important information about industrial safety and worker rights, viewing his role as a mediator between the living and the dead. His final words on the recording indicate his plan to remain in the store until he achieved meaningful contact with the supernatural forces. Store security footage from September 25th shows Dante arriving for his shift at 11:30 p.m. and proceeding with normal cleaning procedures until approximately 2:15 a.m. At that point, surveillance cameras captured him walking toward the storage areas where the autonomous equipment incidents had been most frequent. However, the cameras showed Dante entering a restricted maintenance corridor from which he never emerged. Extensive searches of the building revealed no trace of his presence, and his cleaning equipment was found arranged in perfect geometric patterns that would have required hours of deliberate placement. The investigation into Dante's disappearance uncovered additional evidence supporting his supernatural encounter claims. Security footage analysis revealed numerous instances of equipment operating independently during overnight hours, confirming Dante's video documentation. Other overnight employees, when questioned privately, admitted experiencing similar phenomena but had remained silent due to fear of job termination. The store's management initially dismissed these reports as mass hysteria until electronic recording devices captured the same voice phenomena Dante had documented. Dante's apartment search revealed extensive research into the store's historical background and detailed notes about supernatural manifestation patterns. His daughter Maya, staying with relatives during his overnight work schedule, reported that her father had become increasingly withdrawn and obsessed with helping the people at work who couldn't go home. Dante's video logs were discovered on multiple devices, providing a complete chronological record of supernatural encounters that culminated in his mysterious vanishing. The case prompted corporate headquarters to conduct a comprehensive investigation of the Montana location, including historical research and paranormal consultation services. While no official acknowledgement of supernatural activity was made, the store implemented new policies requiring pairs of employees during overnight maintenance shifts and installed additional security monitoring equipment. The autonomous equipment incidents ceased after Dante's disappearance, suggesting that his interaction with supernatural entities may have resolved whatever unfinished business had been causing the phenomena. Local authorities classified Dante's disappearance as a missing person case rather than supernatural incident, but no evidence of foul play or voluntary departure was ever discovered. His personal belongings, vehicle, and financial accounts remained untouched, indicating that his vanishing was not planned or the result of conventional criminal activity. The video logs stand as the only remaining evidence of Dante's final weeks, documenting his transformation from skeptical employee to willing participant in supernatural phenomena that ultimately claimed his physical presence, while leaving behind a legacy of unexplained events that continue to affect the Montana Walmart location. Let's move to our sixth story. This account comes from the insurance claim investigation report filed by Willow, a claims adjuster who worked for a major commercial insurance company specializing in retail property incidents. The case involved an unprecedented customer rampage that occurred at a Walmart supercenter in Wisconsin during February 2023, when what began as routine wedding weekend shopping trip transformed into a destructive episode that caused over $500,000 in property damage and terrorized dozens of shoppers. The investigation file documents reveal how a celebration turned into chaos and expose the dangerous psychological pressure that social expectations can place on individuals already struggling with mental health issues. The incident centered around Riley, a 34-year-old bride-to-be who had traveled to the Wisconsin location with her wedding party on February 18, 2023, to purchase last-minute decorations and supplies for her ceremony scheduled for the following day. Willow's investigation notes reveal that Riley had been under enormous financial stress planning an elaborate wedding that exceeded her budget by thousands of dollars, while simultaneously dealing with family conflicts about guest lists and venue choices. The wedding party consisted of 6 bridesmaids and Riley's mother, all of whom had been drinking champagne during their shopping expedition as part of what they termed a pre-wedding celebration. The insurance investigation uncovered that Riley's mental breakdown was triggered by a seemingly minor incident involving wedding cake decorations. Security footage analyzed by Willow shows Riley becoming increasingly agitated when she discovered that the specific cake toppers she had ordered online were not available for immediate pickup at the store. The delay would have forced her to modify her wedding cake design with less than 24 hours' notice, a change that represented what Riley perceived as the complete failure of her carefully planned ceremony. Her reaction escalated from frustration to rage as she began viewing every minor imperfection as evidence that her wedding was destined for disaster. Willow's witness interview transcripts reveal that Riley's bridesmaids initially tried to calm her down, suggesting alternative decorations and reassuring her that guests wouldn't notice minor changes to the cake design. However, their well-intentioned efforts only intensified Riley's panic, as she interpreted their suggestions as confirmation that her original plans were inadequate. The psychological pressure of being the center of attention during a major life event, combined with alcohol consumption and financial stress, created a perfect storm for what psychologists term acute stress reaction, manifesting as destructive behavior. The rampage began in the bakery section when Riley started throwing cake decorating supplies off the shelves while screaming about ruined weddings and family disappointment. Security footage shows her systematically destroying merchandise displays while her wedding party stood helplessly nearby, uncertain whether to intervene or call for assistance. Riley's behavior demonstrated classic signs of dissociative episode, where individuals lose awareness of their actions while experiencing overwhelming emotional distress. Her destructive activities appeared purposeful and methodical rather than random, suggesting she was targeting items that symbolized wedding perfectionism. The situation escalated dramatically when Riley moved from the bakery to the clothing department, where she began destroying wedding-related merchandise, including white dresses, formal wear, and accessories. Willow's investigation revealed that Riley had been struggling with body image issues and dress-fitting problems throughout her engagement period, viewing the wedding dress selection process as a source of humiliation rather than joy. Her destructive focus on clothing merchandise represented a psychological attack on the social expectations and physical standards that had been tormenting her for months. The insurance claim documentation shows that Riley's rampage affected multiple store departments as she moved through the building in a state of complete emotional breakdown. She overturned display racks in the jewelry section, scattered cosmetics throughout the beauty department, and destroyed floral arrangements in the garden center. Each area represented different aspects of wedding preparation that had been causing her stress, suggesting that her destructive behavior was an attempt to eliminate the symbols of pressure and expectation that had been overwhelming her mental health. Store employees and customers fled the area as Riley's behavior became increasingly violent and unpredictable. Security footage shows her throwing merchandise at people who tried to approach her while screaming about failed relationships and family pressure. Her wedding party, consisting of her closest friends and family members, found themselves powerless to help someone they thought they knew well, but who had become unrecognizable in her psychological distress. The incident revealed how even supportive social networks can become inadequate when confronting severe mental health crises. The intervention came when store management contacted local police, who arrived to find Riley barricaded in the store's bridal registry section, surrounded by destroyed merchandise and apparently talking to herself. Willow's investigation notes indicate that Riley had entered a dissociative state, where she was reliving arguments with family members and rehearsing conversations with her fiancé about calling off the wedding. Her behavior suggested that the shopping trip had triggered a complete psychological break from the pressures of wedding planning and social expectations. The arrest process required intervention from mental health professionals rather than standard law enforcement procedures, as Riley appeared to be experiencing a complete break from reality. Police body cam footage analyzed by Willow shows Riley alternating between aggressive behavior and complete withdrawal, unable to recognize family members or understand why she was being arrested. The incident demonstrated how retail environments can become triggers for individuals struggling with underlying mental health conditions, especially when combined with alcohol consumption and high-stress life events. The aftermath investigation revealed that Riley had been prescribed anxiety medication for wedding-related stress, but had stopped taking it several weeks before the incident due to side effects that interfered with dress fittings and appearance concerns. Her fiancé reported that she had been experiencing panic attacks and insomnia for months, but had refused professional counseling because she feared that admitting mental health struggles would somehow jinx her wedding. The cultural pressure to maintain perfect appearances during engagement periods had prevented her from seeking help when intervention might have prevented the breakdown. The insurance settlement required extensive documentation of property damage exceeding $500,000, including destroyed merchandise, damaged fixtures, and business interruption costs during store cleanup and restocking. Willow's investigation also covered liability issues related to customer and employee trauma, as several individuals required medical attention for injuries sustained while fleeing from Riley's violent behavior. The case highlighted how mental health crises can create significant financial liability for businesses unprepared to handle psychiatric emergencies. The legal resolution involved Riley pleading guilty to destruction of property charges while receiving court-mandated mental health treatment rather than jail time. Her wedding was canceled, and she subsequently underwent intensive therapy for anxiety disorders and stress management. The case prompted Walmart corporate headquarters to develop new protocols for handling customers experiencing mental health crises, including staff training for recognizing psychological distress and procedures for contacting appropriate professional resources rather than relying solely on law enforcement. Willow's final insurance report noted that the incident could have been prevented through early intervention if Riley's support network had recognized the warning signs of severe psychological distress and encouraged professional treatment before the crisis point. The case serves as a cautionary example of how social pressure and cultural expectations around major life events can exacerbate underlying mental health conditions, creating situations where ordinary retail environments become scenes of tragedy and destruction that affect entire communities of innocent bystanders. The Wisconsin Walmart location implemented enhanced security protocols and established relationships with local mental health crisis intervention teams to better handle similar situations in the future. Riley's case became a training example for insurance adjusters dealing with mental health-related property damage claims, demonstrating the complex intersection between individual psychological crises and commercial liability issues that require both compassion and professional expertise to resolve appropriately and prevent future incidents. Let's move to our seventh story. This account comes from the whistleblower testimony to investigators provided by Hazel. a 31-year-old assistant manager who worked at a Walmart supercenter in Arkansas for 6 years before discovering what she believed to be a systematic corporate cover-up operation. The case emerged in October 2023, when Hazel contacted federal investigators with evidence of what she described as deliberate concealment of workplace safety violations, employee injury reports, and inspection failures that put both workers and customers at serious risk. Her detailed documentation revealed a pattern of institutional corruption that extended far beyond simple policy violations and exposed the darker mechanisms that large corporations sometimes employ to protect their profits at the expense of human safety. Hazel's investigation began when she was assigned to compile safety reports for the store's quarterly corporate review and discovered significant discrepancies between actual incidents and the documentation being submitted to headquarters. During her routine administrative duties, she noticed that workplace injury reports were being systematically modified before transmission to corporate offices, with serious incidents being reclassified as minor accidents and patterns of safety violations being presented as isolated occurrences. Her position in management provided access to both the original incident reports filed by employees and the altered versions being sent to corporate administrators, revealing a deliberate pattern of misrepresentation that had been ongoing for several years. The scope of the cover-up became apparent when Hazel began comparing store records with corporate communications and discovered that entire categories of safety incidents were being omitted from official reports. Slip and fall accidents in areas with known maintenance problems were being attributed to customer clumsiness rather than store negligence, while equipment malfunctions that injured employees were being described as operator error rather than mechanical failure. The pattern suggested a coordinated effort to minimize the store's apparent liability exposure, while avoiding the costs associated with proper safety improvements and equipment maintenance. Hazel's investigation revealed that the falsification scheme was being directed by regional management rather than originating from individual store locations. She discovered internal emails indicating that store managers throughout the district were receiving specific instructions about how to reframe incident reports to minimize corporate liability exposure. The communications used coded language referring to narrative adjustment and context enhancement to describe what was essentially systematic fraud designed to conceal safety violations from regulatory authorities and potential lawsuit discovery processes. The psychological pressure on Hazel intensified when she realized that her own job security was dependent on participating in the cover-up operation. Regional supervisors made it clear that managers who submitted reports containing too many safety violations would face negative performance reviews and potential termination for failing to maintain proper store conditions. This created a system where managers were forced to choose between honest reporting and their continued employment, with most choosing to protect their livelihoods rather than risk their careers for principles they felt powerless to enforce. The evidence Hazel compiled included security footage showing safety hazards that were never officially reported, medical records documenting employee injuries that were attributed to non-work-related causes, and email communications between managers discussing strategies for avoiding regulatory scrutiny. Her position provided access to documentation spanning multiple years, revealing that the falsification scheme had been operating as standard procedure rather than recent emergency response to increased regulatory pressure. The systematic nature of the fraud indicated high-level corporate awareness and approval of the deceptive practices. Hazel's moral crisis deepened when she discovered that some of the concealed safety violations had resulted in serious injuries that could have been prevented through proper reporting and remediation. A customer slip-and-fall incident that resulted in permanent disability had been attributed to individual clumsiness rather than the persistent water leakage problem that store maintenance had been ignoring for months. Similarly, an employee back injury caused by defective lifting equipment had been classified as pre-existing condition rather than workplace accident, denying the worker appropriate medical coverage and compensation. The investigation expanded when Hazel realized that the safety report falsification was connected to broader financial manipulation designed to improve store performance metrics. Maintenance costs were being deferred by reclassifying necessary repairs as cosmetic improvements, while employee injury expenses were being shifted to different budget categories to avoid impacting safety-related cost centers. The scheme created artificial improvements in store profitability while transferring actual costs to insurance claims, worker compensation programs, and customer lawsuit settlements. Hazel's attempts to address the situation through internal channels proved futile, as her concerns were dismissed or redirected through bureaucratic procedures designed to prevent serious investigation. When she raised questions about report accuracy during management meetings, she was told that corporate policies required optimistic interpretation of incidents to maintain positive store image and employee morale. Her supervisors suggested that excessive focus on safety violations reflected poor management skills rather than legitimate concern for worker and customer welfare. The breakthrough came when Hazel discovered that federal workplace safety inspectors had been requesting specific documentation that was being deliberately withheld or falsified before submission. The store had received multiple citations for safety violations, but the penalties were being minimized through strategic appeals and document manipulation rather than actual safety improvements. This revelation convinced Hazel that the cover-up operation constituted federal fraud rather than simple corporate policy violation, prompting her to contact external investigators. The federal investigation revealed that Hazel's store was part of a regional pattern affecting dozens of locations throughout multiple states. Investigators discovered that corporate headquarters had developed standardized procedures for minimizing safety violation reporting, while maintaining plausible deniability about awareness of systematic fraud. The scheme involved multiple levels of management and had been refined over several years to avoid detection during routine audits and inspections. The psychological toll on Hazel became severe as she faced retaliation from co-workers and supervisors who viewed her whistleblowing as betrayal of workplace loyalty. She received anonymous threats, was excluded from management meetings, and faced deliberate scheduling changes designed to interfere with her ability to continue gathering evidence. The isolation and pressure affected her sleep, appetite, and family relationships as she struggled with the knowledge that her cooperation with investigators was destroying her career in retail management. The case concluded with multiple federal agencies launching coordinated investigations into Walmart's safety reporting practices across several regions. Hazel received federal whistleblower protection, but her career in retail management was effectively ended due to industry blacklisting and employer retaliation. The investigation resulted in significant fines and mandatory safety improvements. But Hazel's personal sacrifice demonstrated the enormous costs that individuals face when confronting institutional corruption and the complex moral calculations required when choosing between personal security and public welfare. The Arkansas Walmart location implemented new safety reporting procedures and oversight mechanisms designed to prevent future falsification schemes. However, Hazel's case highlighted the fundamental structural problems that enable corporate cover-ups and the inadequate protections available for employees who risk their livelihoods to expose institutional fraud. Her testimony stands as evidence of the courage required to challenge powerful organizations and the personal costs associated with choosing ethical principles over economic security in corporate environments, where profit maximization often conflicts with human safety and welfare. That concludes our exploration of 7 disturbing true Walmart horror stories that reveal the darker side of America's retail landscape. From psychological stalking and product contamination to supernatural encounters and corporate corruption, these documented cases demonstrate that sometimes the most ordinary places can harbor the most extraordinary terrors. Each story represents real people who faced unimaginable situations while simply trying to work or shop in what should have been safe environments. Thank you for joining us on Silent Fears, where we uncover the authentic horror stories that prove reality can be more disturbing than any fiction. Remember to subscribe for more true horror content, and until next time, stay vigilant and stay safe.